Okay, I think that's everyone seated almost. Welcome everyone this morning. We are so glad that you could make it. Welcome to the launch of a new and groundbreaking project, Interventions on Non-Custodial Measures for Women in Conflict with the Law in South Africa. I'm Lenina Dasul and I will be moderating this event this morning. I wanted to start by saying, as I was poring over the literature on this topic, I read that the number of women in prison worldwide has been increasing at staggering levels, mainly as a consequence of punitive drug policies that recur as a first response. I also noted that while there are standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners that apply to and in keeping with our history of gender and other inequalities, these rules did not draw sufficient attention to women's particular needs. And through this project, we hope to change that. Now, before we go into the project, we are going to call on some stakeholders to say some prayers for us to open this launch. And so we are going to call on Nosipho Daniels to come and say a prayer for us, and Advocate Abdurraouf, who will say a Muslim prayer for us.
Protocol observed. Shall we bow our heads in the mighty name of Jesus? Lord, this morning we come before you. We approach your throne of grace as we're about to start, Lord Jesus, this program. We invite your Holy Spirit. Guide us, O Lord. Sanctify us, Lord, as we are about to discuss issues that are affecting our society. Lord, I want to just touch upon your word that we trust so much. Lord, when you created a woman, you took out a rib out of Adam's body because you saw that the world will be nothing without a woman. But today, Lord, we are crying every day due to the pains that are caused by the very same men in our lives. We come to you, Lord Jesus, for answers. There is none like you. You created heavens and earth. So therefore we come to you, Lord Jesus, for answers this very morning. Give us guidance, Lord. Give us wisdom to run this program. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We ask our Lord, our sustainer, our guider, the one who put us on this earth, and the one that will take us away from this earth, to bless this gathering, to let it be a success. So when we leave this gathering, we cannot say that we were not here today to the benefit of everyone that was present here today. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
And now we are just going to call up Reverend Queen to do another prayer for us.
Let's close our eyes. Father, in the mighty name of the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth, Father, you are Alpha and Omega. We bring you in this place, O God. You have created us based on your likeness and image, O God. Right now, O God, we call unto your presence to speak to the hearts of women and children, O God, that tend to be reduced to the status of a minor, O God. Father, when you said you declared us perfect, O God, we are praying for the dignity of women. We are praying for restoration of a girl child in the mighty name of the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Father, heal our wounds. We speak right now unto the justice that will accommodate the needs of a woman, the needs of a girl child, in the name of our Lord Jesus. Father, we thank you. We believe healing is coming from you. We believe restoration is coming from you. We thank you. We know from this conference the life of a woman and the children will never be the same again. We declare and decree justice and righteousness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And now we are going to have a minute of silence for all those who have passed. It's been a tough 2 years for all of us. So we are thinking of our loved ones who have passed away from the pandemic, but also those who have passed away from gender-based violence and others. So we're going to start a moment of silence now, if we may just bow our heads. Thank you. Now we will move forward with the program for today. I am very excited to call on the project owner, the woman driving this important cause. Oh, yes. My apologies. Where is my program? Yes, you are right. My apologies, Councillor. I would actually like to call on Councillor Rashid Adams, who is the councillor for Ward 49 and has just been re-elected to a second term. Congratulations. And who was graciously assisted with in procuring this venue as well. So we want to say thank you to you and thank you to the City of Cape Town, and to please call you forward to come and do some opening remarks for us.
Program moderator, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good morning, Molweni, Namaste, Goeiemorgen. And on behalf of the City of Cape Town, it gives me great pleasure to welcome each and everyone here. A special welcome to our MEC for Social Development in the province, Minister Shana Fernandez, and all the other dignitaries that are here today. I feel so blessed to be part of this wonderful occasion, and a special thanks to you, Caroline, for affording me this platform to be with you. And welcome to the ATHLONE Stadium. And the reason why I say that welcome to the ATHLONE Stadium, I'm proud of this area because I'm the ward councillor and I'm the custodian, and I say I'm the owner of the area because I love this community so much. And I've got a seconder here who works with me. Welcome to the gem of the ATHLONE community. And it's so appropriate that I'm calling this the gem because we are here today to discuss issues pertaining to the gems of our society. A place where we should not really be, but this is where we are right now. We are looking and we are discussing ways and means of how legislation should be conducted so that the women of our communities are protected. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to use this opportunity to sort of market myself, because before elections I said I want to come back to Ward 49 to serve a second term, not for my own interest, but for the interest of my community. And that is, and I'm grateful to the Almighty for granting me this opportunity to serve our communities. And I have great people in this community, like Caroline and like Mr. Jeff Paulser and like Mr. Stund at the back, who works, and I look forward to working collectively with all of you so that we can make a difference in the lives of our people, so that we can make the fundamental changes that is required. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have much more to say because we didn't come here we came here to learn. But I look forward to working with each of you. I invite everybody that is sitting here from the various organizations. Let this occasion not just be a talk shop occasion. Let this be the ground and basically the foundation of something positive that's going to happen in the Athlone area. I'd love you to work with me on the ground. I don't work in my office. I don't work off the telephone. I like being on the streets. Come and join me when we go to the Blokker. Come and join me when we go to Springbok City, Eland City and Kudus City. My minister walks with me all the time and she deals with those issues. So yes, we used to working together. Let us hear what the real issues of our communities are, because many a times we are moved away by perception and by what we hear. And the stories that we hear from the ground is far different. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being part of Caroline and the Callis Foundation's work. And Caroline, I really am forward to working with you. I was very jealous in the last term because you were in a different ward, but now you are in my ward and I know we're going to work well together. But thank you very much for all of this, and good luck to everybody for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for that inspiring welcome words. And now to call on the project's owner, the woman driving this important cause, Caroline Peters. Ms. Peters is a human rights activist who has been in the gender rights field for almost 30 years. She's the director and founder of the Callis Foundation, the coordinator of the Cape Flats Women's Movement, and the Women's Legal Centre's Human Rights Defenders Program. Caroline, can you please come forward and tell us about this exciting project?
Okay, good morning, goeiemorgen, assalamu alaikum, and welcome. Thank you everybody, just from me, welcome, thank you. I want to greet you. Oh, protocols. And sorry if I'm going to stutter, but I'm a bit nervous. I was saying to them, you know, I've done so many big events, but it's the first big event we do as Callis Foundation. So we've done Sawid in the province, in big things. I see my sisters here from Sawid and everywhere else. So please bear with me. So good morning. I want to greet Madam Moderator, Linda Naidu from UNODC, the MEC for Social Development, Ms. Shauna Fernandez, Advocate Bonnie Curry, Advocate Michelle Adams, who's joined us online, Advocate Yaki Vessels from Limpopo, the judiciary, so those are from the judiciary members, DCS, that's joined us online. I'm not sure who's here from DCS. I think Dr. Zodwa Mosamo's online, Councillor Adams, and all other government departments. Oh yes, and my legal aid, the Wilna Lambley. I don't see Wilna online, but I want to welcome everybody here. I want to greet everyone, the partners, the stakeholders who's been here since the beginning. Before we start even with what we're here for, I want to acknowledge that this is 16 days of activism, and we were intentional when we did this launch here. We wanted to take place during 16 days of activism. So while I was sitting last night after 12 preparing for this morning, I went online to find something around 16 days. And what stood out for me was the femicide that is happening across the world. And we know that gender-based violence escalates to eventually being femicide. You know, so it starts off and the violence escalates, and that's where women end up being murdered. And I saw that the campaign for 16 days, so remember we commemorating also 30 years of the global 16 days. And for this year, the theme is End Femicide Now. Minister, our South African figures is every 3 hours. And if we look at that, 8 women a day, it amounts to 8 women a day. If we look at gender-based violence figures, it says 1 in 3 women. Each one of us knows someone that has been affected by gender-based violence. So it's 1 in 3 women. And we are saying gender-based violence. You know, many years ago it was 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. And now we've changed that to gender-based violence. We know we've included, we acknowledge that there's men, but we know that women make up most of the statistics. So Having looked at 16 days, and what do I say about the 16 days for this year, that just struck me. I mean, there's one country that 50% of their female murders is due to femicide. And that is shocking, it is horrific. And we know that GBV ends up in femicide. So, as we know, the COVID pandemic and its additional consequences such as lockdown, restricted mobility and isolation from regular support systems for women. And this has contributed to increased gender-based violence. So despite political commitments, obligations under international laws, calls to actions from local activists and pressure from international bodies, government have simply not done enough to end gender-based violence. If we look at the multi-sectoral things that happened when COVID took place, we turned it on its head. I know we're long out of the woods, but imagine if we do the same with the pandemic of GBV. If we put the same resources in, if we have the same will to change GBV like we did with COVID, how different this would look. I was saying, almost 30 years. I remember I said to Elizabeth when she came in here, we were young women in the sector. You know, we were young activists marching down Klipfontein Road from Guguletu to Klipfontein Road. We are tired of these marches. We are tired of doing this every year in 16 days. We are called upon by media. I think I give 3 interviews daily around 16 days. But we know there should be a topic 365 days, but it shouldn't even be a topic that we have to say all the time in your face, 365 days. I almost say government has not done enough. Linda Naidu came to visit and she said to me yesterday, Caroline, I said, we live on the Cape Flats where shooting has become normal. You know, you pick up your phone and you just check, oh, where was that shooting now? Okay, now it's not close to me. And then you check a few minutes later, who was it that they shot? Was it, because we know our gangsters. We live in a gang-infested area, the Cape Flats, you know, and that's all we do. But it's become normal. The trauma of our communities has become normal. Shooting. Children, you walk into the areas, children can tell you, wie vir wie nou geskiet. Who was shot by whom? The children run towards the shooting. They don't run away from shooting. They are the lookout for the gangsters. They are there. So, you know, Linda, I do not have the answers, but I want to say interventions like these. And if we continue this, I mean, I'm 57 now, God willing, I want to be 87 and still, but I don't still want to stand here and saying all these things, you know. But yes, interventions, sports, different things. Councillor, I'm going to come knock on your door and come and say, Councillor, what are we doing here in this ward? And I'm also happy to be working with you. Minister, you know, what is DSD? Where's those programs? What is it? How are we going to change the tide? It can change. It can change. And only if all of us play a part. So that's about 16 days and my thing around gender-based violence. But why are we here? I've got 5 minutes. I won't be long. I promise you. Okay? Sure, I said to them this morning, I've typed 3 pages and I don't know where I am. Anyway, so why are we here? So I just checked last night, the first, so when COVID-19 took place, remember women were restricted, we immediately responded to a food crisis. So the food line became the gathering point in our communities. Everything happened from Carlos Foundation. Linda came yesterday while we were feeding. And she said, so is this where you live? Yes, it's where I live, where everything is taking place the last 2 years, Linda. It's crazy. I know it's crazy myself. So our homes became the safe spaces. Our homes became where we fed, where we had support groups. I'm going to show you the pictures of how we have support groups in the garage, and the women is cooking in the kitchen, and there's someone being counseled in the lounge. And sure, I don't even know why Gerald married me still. After all this, I got married this year. So, because it's just crazy, but this is what we do in our communities. You know, so when we responded, and I'll never forget on the second day when I had that call, that knock on the door, and I said, "Hoekom is julle buite kan julle moet binne wees? COVID, you know, you need to be inside." But remember, people were dying from hunger in their homes. If they were not coming outside, hustling, then where? They were going to die of starvation in their homes. So we find everybody was already on day 2 walking around. I remember getting onto the truck with a loud hailer asking people to stay inside, driving around with food in the boot counselor, going to dish food out. And then of course that wasn't practical. So from day 7 we started feeding. One day, for those of you that feed, we served 850 liters of food on one day in different areas. And that was the volume of food people were hungry. Anyway, so day 7, I won't forget this, and of course I see life through a gender lens. And I watch the women in the queue, and I could see the tears in this one woman's eyes. And I pretended I didn't see, and I walked around and I played with the child and I said, "Are you okay?" And she's, "Yeah, you know." But of course I knew she was okay, wasn't okay, and that's how I engaged her. And I said to her, "Okay, come when everybody's gone." And I'll never forget, and she came there that night after everybody was gone. Remember, curfew was very early. After 6 she was there. And that was the first client we had for the support group. And so, of course, women knew that this was a safe space and everybody started coming there. So the support group we had was women, and remember, women now that was misusing substance could not get their fix. They were hustling. Nobody could get their fix. So GBV increased. There was no cigarettes. There's no drugs in the communities. And of course, violence just escalated because the men were frustrated and the women were on the road hustling to make money to get drugs home and food home. So the food became the thing for families. So women would gather at the kitchens. I remember Avril Andrews phoning me. She's here from Hanover Park to say that, "Caroline, there's a woman here sitting early morning. We're only feeding this afternoon." She says she's safer sitting outside my kitchen than going home. We extracted her from Hanover Park and sent her to a shelter. And that is what we did then as the Cape Flats Women's Movement, extracting women, taking them to safe places. Then on the 30th, anyway, fast forward, we then established a support group of women, the intersection between women in violent relationships but that misuse substance. So that became the group, and of course, there with this substance, there's going to be crime. So for many of these women, they were in conflict with the law, intersections galore. And then when Marie Claire van Hout contacted me, she was assigned by UNODC to work on a project to do some research around women in conflict with the law. She then contacted me through Women's Legal Center, and this is how I got involved with the program. So about a year ago, Marie Claire phones me and interviews me and says, "Oh, I hear this is what you do with this woman," and I got involved. Anyway, we fast-tracked to March, where we then had a online webinar with UNODC in partnership with Department of Justice, Department of Correctional Service, Legal Aid SA, UNODC, and DCS. Correctional Services, DOJ, Legal Aid, and myself, yes. So the 5 of us met with Linda Naidu after hours, many hours, everybody trying to get to the right time of the day where we were all, and this is how this project was born. But I want to tell you, I'm very excited. I'm super excited that we're launching this because women, you know, when I came here to ATHLONE Stadium, it also reminded me, if I can just tell you a little story. So, ek kan baie praat. Ek gaan nou, I need a day, Minister. I want to tell you, you know. So ATHLONE Stadium, I also want to tell you, for those that don't know, is a very iconic place. This was just one stand, and then of course with the World Cup it was built up and it was made beautiful. But before that, and many of you don't know, I'm a girl, I'm a product of the Cape Flats. I grew up here in Bridgetown. I was born and raised here. This was also a gang initiation site. Do you know that, Councillor? This was a gang initiation site, ATHLONE Stadium. And you know, as I said, writing this last night, I got, my mag het gedraai, sorry, I can't say that in English. And my stomach turned. And I thought, it like jolted me to when I was a young girl. when they were doing gang banging in the stadium. Do you know what gang banging is? Where a girl, they say, hulle sit daar op die tafel. The whole gang has sex with a girl. And this happened at ATHLONE Stadium. And I thought the irony of this. And because I lived here, I grew up here, I lived this life. And so many times people can't understand why I'm so passionate about girls on the Cape Flats and why I'm so passionate about advocating for a better life for these girls. Because I was that girl. I was that 15-year-old that was gang raped in this area. I was that girl too. She is me and I am her. So when I see this young women, and I know for many in this room, we become desensitized. We see legal aid, the prosecutors, you see crime all the time, so it's just another criminal. But you do not know her background. You do not know what transpired in her life. I do. I was that girl. And so maybe that's why I'm so passionate about advocating for these young girls, because I was that young girl once. And so for me, I changed because many things happened. I had a father that was the ward councillor. I had parents I almost had guidance. Some young women don't have that. Some young women don't have another person to look up to. They don't have a foundation, a godly foundation, a spiritual foundation to fall back on. I had that. But not all young women can make that turn. So when I was running with the gangs, I always had that at home. Others don't have that. So that this project is for me, I'm very passionate. When I see, there's a young girl in our area, part of the I'm just going to tell you that story quickly and I'm done. And so I'm not going to mention a name, but when I watch her in Bridgetown, I'm sad. Because when she started the support group for me, her boyfriend was incarcerated. And she changed, she got clean, and huge difference. The minute he stepped out of prison, because he was in for murder, I watch them, it's like watching Bonnie and Clyde. Unless you live on the Cape Flats, you don't know how it is. It's like watching a movie, Bonnie and Clyde. There they go. You know they're committing crime. You must see her eyes. One day she came to fetch food and she said, Auntie Carol, I must see you. I said, yes, please come. And then she missed an opportunity when he was not with her. Remember, he controls her. And so she came on a time when I wasn't there. And I watch her, and she's beautiful. And all I see is, I wish I can save that girl, that young woman. But I can't. He controls her, he's there. And so those are the young women, or those are the women that this program. So there's copies of the handbook. And I also want to say it took a long time. It took a year almost to develop the handbook, Linda. And so I want to say there's copies of the handbook. There's the situational analysis. Pelisa can email it to you. There's some hard copies. We've printed a few hard copies. If you need that, Linda brought some of the situational assessment with as well. If you like, it's in front there. I'm not going to keep you up, but just for me to say that I'm excited to see that there's going to be non-custodial measures for women who deserve this. Okay, we're not talking about violent criminals. We're not talking about the women, even the women with the violence. I sometimes look at what happens, and I think because I look with the lens, what has happened in her life before? What has been there that made her so violent? What happened to her? Yeah, because for me, as a survivor of child abuse, as a survivor of a gang rape, I know. But I changed and I made something different, and that was grace. Yeah? But for others it doesn't. This was my path. But for others there was a different path. So I'm excited and I'm excited to hear what Legal Aid is coming up with and the other partners, the stakeholders. Bonnie, I know I met with magistrates last week at Wynberg. Even they are excited about the opportunities of non-custodial sentencing. Yeah. So thank you for coming. Thank you for everybody that took this chance on us, that didn't know. Everybody say, Carolina, what is this? What are you doing now? Those that know me now, I'm always busy with something and up to something. So thank you for taking the time to come and be as excited. This is groundbreaking. This is the first time this is going to be done in South Africa. In the Western Cape, we know we're the leading province. That's no question about that. We know things happen in the Western Cape and it gets done here. And we want this to be a good guide, a good write-up after 6 months. So by the end of June, God willing, we will do something in March, but we'll speak about the way forward later in the program. But thank you once again. Those are some of, yeah. Ek kan heel dag praat, so I'll stop there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Caroline. You know you went over time, eh? So I think that it changes the narrative, especially at events like this, when we can bring in personal stories and when we can see people who have been affected by that, and through that understand how we are all affected by these things. I'm going to tag on for Caroline, for everybody quickly. You know, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago maybe, I was standing in Woolies and I downloaded a report around parents and step-parents who had killed their children. It was just a report where they had been interviewed, and these are what you would perceive to be the worst perpetrators. It was a report done at UWC, and I opened it up as I was standing in the line, but I wish I hadn't, because a few minutes in, it was a long queue, I felt myself crying. I read a story about a woman who lives in the Western Cape who literally had nowhere to go with her 2 children. I have known people who had nowhere to go. Like Caroline, I was very fortunate. I often say my youngest brother was the Swartskapi and he was very naughty. And we just bridged that, we just kept him away from that line for becoming a gangster. And that was because when I was 15 and my other brother was 14, my mother made us go and knock at doors and look for him every single night, no matter how angry we were. And now I understand why. And so on that note, we are going to hear some messages of goodwill from organizations and stakeholders who work on the front line directly with victims, survivors, and some even perpetrators of abuse. I'm going to call on Advocate Tarisai Mchuchu Macmillan first. She's the Executive Director at Mosaic Women's Training Center. She is a crime and violence prevention specialist, and prior to her current role, she was Deputy Program Manager at Fight for Peace International, Deputy Director at Resources aimed at the prevention of child abuse and neglect, which is RAPCAN, and served as the Director of Young in Prison South Africa for 7 years. Let's welcome Tarisai to the podium.
Good morning, all protocols observed, because I don't have much time. You know, Caroline is like a mother to us. Some of us were, she's been here for years. Some of us were still in diapers, I think, and school when she started this journey, and with many of you. So I learn a lot from her, and I don't think that there's anyone better who can champion this phase that we're in. I think that we are at the pinnacle of feminist activism. It was just 2 years ago, we were at the summit, and we all remember Martha sharing her story with us. And 3 years ago, actually, 3 years ago, COVID seems to have taken a year or two away from my mathematics. And there are times where I think about her. Where is she? We listened to a story, all of us, you know. We listened to a story, and then we watched her go back to prison. And we continued with our activism, and we know we're all overwhelmed with the pandemic of GBV. But she walked out with that story, and there are many women with that story. And so for me, I think this is, when you told me about the project, when we discussed a few weeks ago about this, it excites me. It excites me because, as you know, my first introduction to the sector was with Young in Prison. working with children in conflict with the law. And we had this particular program, part of the program, where we did life mapping with them. And each child would map out. You would have 15-year-olds or 12-year-olds. At the time, the Child Justice Act had not been passed as well. So you had young children, particularly in the correctional facilities. And they would, in their life maps, there was always something similar that connected them. And it was always when there was a broken trust relationship with an adult. And that's often where they didn't have anywhere to turn to. And often gangs are lying waiting because they need a sense of belonging. They need somebody who's going to give them that affirmation. And if they're not getting it at home, then they get it in the gangs. And that is a problem. And so to have, and we know that women are the ones that are bearing the care work of these children. So if you can save the mom from being taken away from this child and not be incarcerated, where you can avoid, where the mom is not violent, is not a threat to society, we can actually trace the conflict with the law situation to something we can solve that's societal and not necessarily that is, that needs deeper interventions. Then I think this is the woman who can champion it. And for Mosaic, as we discussed already, we work with women. We provide services, and we are willing to support that. We are willing to provide the support in terms of training, in terms of ensuring that there's a referral pathway where they can be referred for counseling, for healing particularly. And we do have an empowerment program. So through that counseling, maybe there's some skills-based programs that we can link them, and we can learn as we grow that program as well together. So we are looking forward to that and to supporting this program and really to seeing it, because like Caroline mentioned, the model is being built here. So let's build the best practice so that we can see it being transferred throughout the other provinces. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teresai. And now we will invite Elizabeth Peterson, Director of the South Africa Faith and Family Institute. Ms. Peterson served as a social worker and managing director of St. Anne's Homes for Abused Women and Children for 15 years. Together with her colleagues in the shelter sector, they established the Western Cape Transitional and Special Needs Housing Forum, and she played a key role in establishing the national shelter movement of South Africa. She's currently pursuing a PhD which explores the hidden theologies present in intervention programs for perpetrators of intimate partner abuse. We'd like to invite you to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is such a wonderful, wonderful joy, Caroline, to be able to be part of this moment. So I'm saying my PhD process is critical but stable, because I've just come out from under the rock where I've been like for I don't know how many years. And so it's now with the external examination. So I'm not yet out of the woods. But I'm so, so profoundly proud and grateful for this particular opportunity that I'm able to share with you and with the foundation that you founded. So I just wanted, there was just a couple of comments that I wanted to make about justice. And yes, you know South African Faith and Family Institute. If you don't know, we work with faith leaders and faith communities, so we work across different religions. And our particular focus is really to get faith leaders to think about what they preach and teach and how that lands with us in our intimate relationships. And so we do not parade women's pain and horror. We've had enough of that. Not enough, it must be in our faces all the time, but instead of just consistently giving people statistics and talking generally about it, we really get religious leaders to think theologically and to interrogate what it is that they preach, teach, pastoral, spiritual care, what you pray over a woman or a man. If you're preaching, whatever your theme is of your sermon, you must remember there's possibly a perpetrator that's listening to you. There are victims and survivors sitting also listening to you. And there are children who hopes that somebody will actually say something that will genuinely help. And so that is what we grapple with religious leaders. We have various training. We've developed the training model. But it's also not for us. We do not want to come and just do a workshop here and there. We don't believe in that. We believe in journeying. So if it's a faith leader that wants, to engage this, we work with you and we journey with you and your faith community. So you can find out more about what we do. But I'm saying that to give you a sort of a sense of the work that Safi does, but then also to link it with one of the scriptures that says that God requires us to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly before our God. And when we think of the concept of justice, and it comes to this particular issue that Caroline and many of us have been working on, I'm just reflecting on how we sat, sitting in some of those initial, when we were discussing the Domestic Violence Act, even the Prevention of Family Violence Act. And sometimes I must be honest, and this is my critique, I believe that we are sitting with the kinds of issues of protection orders, these things are falling apart because it's not culturally competent. Some of us have sat there. We have said women talk about faith, and we've also said women are talking about end the violence, intervene with our partners, because even if the relationship ends, he is probably going to be in a life. In Africa, in our context, we do not have the luxury of being completely separated from our perpetrators. Whether our relationship has ended or whatever the situation is, some of our perpetrators are preaching to us. You would know that. Some of us, are sleeping with our perpetrators. And so when you speak about the personal, I've always said, I don't do this work for other women. We must stop that narrative, this disconnect. Women who are doing this work, they have stories to tell. In my case, I have never seen my dad use violence and abuse. I'm one of 9 children. I've seen how he's been treated like crap in the church, in the community, through the apartheid system. We've struggled through poverty and all of that, but I've never seen him use violence and abuse. And so I really want to say that there are many men like him. And so we have to do this groundbreaking kind of work to begin to amplify what is happening even here today. Colored women on the Cape Flats that has navigated all sorts of oppression, multiple on all sorts of levels, that we must change this narrative. So for those of you who would have a chance, go to the Slave Lodge. We've launched a Men Affirming Dignity, and to specifically look at colored men affirming dignity. And because we need to confront perpetrators with this other narrative, and then also, expand. But I want to come back to just conclude by saying we are definitely in support and very proudly supporting Caroline, you and Callis Foundation, and whoever is involved, the UN, and all the folk that are coming alongside you with this particular initiative. So I want to say, you remind me of, we are I'm told that this year is the year of Charlotte McClakey. And so there's two statements I just want to say. So about Charlotte, firstly, in fact, when she, at her funeral, or there was a last line in a eulogy, it reads, she was everybody's friend and nobody's enemy. And so you kind of, hold that, that space, for us. But also something that I also kind of feel reflects who you are and what Charlotte, one of her famous comments and statements, she said, the work is not for yourselves. Kill that spirit of self and do not live above your people, but live with them. And if you can rise, bring somebody with you. And you are doing that. You are using your story, your lived experience as a way of so I said, somebody said the other day that if you know what I have survived, or what I have survived will kill you. But I said, maybe let's shift that to say, if you know what I have survived, or the things that I have survived can heal you. And this is what you are doing. And so lastly, I want to say to the government that's here, to the UN, ODC, all these authorities, we know the issue. We've known it for a long time. Let us not do lip service. Please, support. Don't just come at these occasions and pilot stuff and make us look good and you look good. Do justice genuinely. When you use Caroline, we know of being used also. We know that. You invite us to the table, you give us funding, or to just start something, but you do not see things through. So I want to challenge you. You see, there's no time. There is no time anymore. I want to challenge faith communities, faith leaders. I want to challenge the feminist movement. I want to challenge government. All of us, those who are sitting with the funding, stop saying to us that we do not fit your indicators. Talk to us. We will tell you what the indicators are in the community. So let this be the year where we shift completely. Support, not just today. Don't just want to be seen. I want to see that you will sustain this particular initiative, and may we be part of healing ourselves, because we've become used to doing, sort of this little project, and piecemeal kind of interventions. Caroline is your person with integrity, like many other organizations in this country. So God bless you. God help us that we do not delay justice, and that we do not conflate and confuse and put more burden on women who have to use substance, and they get involved in all sorts of things because of all these multi-layers of oppression. And so let us all, I know we are awake, but that's my prayer this Advent, that Africa, I pray for Africa's great awakening, where we stop just wanting to please and run after the money, but that we get up and do what we do, like Caroline have been doing, with money, without money. And so we will see the difference. There are many colleagues here. It's so wonderful to see everybody. So thank you very much, and God bless you and strengthen you.
Thank you very, very much. That brought up a lot, I think, for me, possibly for everyone. Before we move on to the next speaker, I just want to say, I don't know if anyone's watched, but there's a movie on Netflix called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom about a famous artist, jazz artist, back in, I don't know, I tried to Google it to see when, 1927 in Chicago. And I watched this movie because I wanted some entertainment and I thought it would be fun, and it was about this strong black woman. But half of the movie was in the basement with the male band, and I couldn't understand it in the beginning, but there was a lot of talk about oppression by these black men. And the youngest black man had just been oppressed over and over again, and he was trying to make a name for himself. And when at that studio, the head of the studio tried to, instead of let him produce his own music, offered to buy his songs for $5, he couldn't say anything back to that white man. So he went back inside and stabbed a band member for stepping on his shoes. And I watched it months ago, but I can't keep thinking about that misplaced trauma and anger. And that's what you brought up for me, and I'd recommend everyone go watch it because it is so deep. And I think about that now when I think about people in the community, and when I think about going, oppressed people going to work. Now we're oppressed at work and we come home and we take it out on everyone else there. So I just wanted to mention that, and to take us into the next speaker, who is Advocate Amanda Stemele from the Women's Legal Center. She has been an attorney for 12 years. She started a career at the UWC Legal Aid Clinic and coordinated the UWC Satellite Clinic in Khayelitsha. And for the past 8 years, she worked in the role of family advocate at the Family Advocates Office in Cape Town, and is currently appointed as an attorney at the Women's Legal Center, working very closely with the human rights defenders. I would like to welcome her to the podium.
Shoot, that made me sound so quiet. I think I'm just a human rights activist. Good morning, everyone. Shall I say all protocol observed? I'd written a small speech. I know Siam Samai was supposed to speak today, our director. Unfortunately, she's unavailable, so therefore I think I'm best placed to be standing here today, since we are, as the Women's Legal Center, working with Caroline and the human rights defenders. And as the Women's Legal Center, we advance women's rights and also support those rights, you understand? So in terms of this project, a lot of speakers have spoken, and I listened to them and I get goosebumps, and I'm hoping that it's going to move forward. But then, if you understand the Women's Legal Center, then we will be the ones also holding those government officials accountable to what they're saying that they're going to do. Sorry. So I'm thankful, I'm excited as well to be part of this project, and also I do wish you all the best, wish us all the best. I want to include myself because I want to be part of the process, because this is something big, this is something huge. And if it's happening now only in the Western Cape, I'm hoping that it's going to move forward, not only in the Western Cape, but throughout South Africa, throughout Africa, because it's an international thing. And thank you to all the stakeholders, everybody that is joined to be part of this project. I'd written a speech, but then I look at you, and then I can't, because I'm just saying that this is what we are saying. We support as a Women's Legal Center. We know that we know what the women are going through, and we know that as advisors, and when they do come to our offices, we know where to send them. And also workshops around these things, we are able to do them, and we're able to work together as a unit with regards to whether it's the magistrates, whether it's the prosecutors, whether it's people referring matters to our offices. We are there. So I want to say thank you for the beginning, the start of this, and then hopefully that we will all be finishing this project together, because this is what we do. If we are human rights defenders, and if we are saying that we're defending women's rights, this is easy, if you are focused. So I'm just saying that I'm hoping that it's going to work out practically. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be a long process, but if we just keep together and try to see where the other one is falling, to see whether we can pick it up, and that is something that I believe that is going to happen, and this is the start of a very good thing, and I'm grateful and thankful for it. Okay.
You can see Amanda's an advocate because she kept to time. Next, we are going to have Advocate Bernadine Butcher, the Director of the Provincial Women's Shelter Movement. She is joining us via Zoom. She's an advocate of the High Court of South Africa and has been involved in protecting women and children's rights throughout her career, both in private practice and as a senior family advocate. And she serves on the Executive Committee for the National Shelter Movement and is the chairperson of the Western Cape Women's Shelter Movement. And she also heads up the National Shelter Helpline. So she will, oh, there you are, Bernadine. I will leave it to you.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm so sorry I can't be there in person today. I have an engagement that I'm just really rushing out of that to come to this one, but I could not be here today. Thank you, Lenina, and congratulations to all, especially to Caroline and the Callis Foundation and the UNODC on this much-needed initiative. Female prisoners are a vulnerable group with specific needs and requirements, yet prison facilities worldwide are primarily designed for male prisoners. Research tells us that female offenders most often do not pose a risk to society, and that their imprisonment, direct imprisonment, may render social integration thereafter difficult, if not impossible. So it's about time that we start to examine how the criminal justice system treats women who are in conflict with the law in South Africa, and moreover than that, to commit to making the criminal justice system more gender responsive. As our Deputy Minister of Justice said about this initiative, the impact of GBV should not be underestimated in women who are in conflict with the law. So I'm so encouraged that we're finally starting to do this much needed work. The criminal justice system has many stakeholders, all the way from SAPs to legal aid and prosecutors, magistrates. Each and every one of us has a role to play in making sure that the criminal justice system is more gender responsive. And today is the start of that very necessary work. As the Western Cape Women's Shelter Movement, the National Shelter Movement and the Saki Bartman Center, you have our support and gratitude for tackling this critical program. As Elizabeth said earlier, we need to do rather than talk. Whatever way we can, we will do with you. We believe that you're more than equal to the task. Onwards. Thank you.
And those are our goodwill messages from organizations. Now, just before we move on to state stakeholders, I'm going to read a short poem. Caroline and I thought it might be a good idea just to break it up a little bit. And while I was looking for a poem that focused on women, I was thinking about what might be the most appropriate one. And I remember looking at a bookshelf and opening No Longer Whispering to Power, which is the book about Thuli Madonsela. And she had in there, she's not the author, but included a poem that she had read out called Invictus. I think many of us are familiar with it. I'm going to read it out now. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the foul clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. And I thought it was so fitting, because what we are trying to do is build a platform and a project that will allow these women to understand that they are the captains of their own fate and soul. So joining us now, I just need to check my amended program to make sure that I have the correct person up next. Yes, okay. Advocate Michelle Adams, the acting regional court president with the judiciary. Sorry, Caroline. Can I just ask? Sorry. Yes, it is Advocate Michelle Adams. My apologies. Advocate Michelle Adams is the current acting regional court president with over 27 years of experience. Oh, yes, I am. We've got the keynote address first. That's what happens when I leave my program at the chair. So let me just... Well, actually, my program was not updated. So. Yes. So I've just got to get the stakeholder. Yes. So now we will be calling up for the keynote address Dr. Linda Naidu, who is the UNODC Regional Office for Southern Africa National Project Officer for Gender-Based Violence. I would like to invite Dr. Linda Naidu up.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and speakers, MEC Shana Ferdinand, Advocate Bonnie Curie, Councillor Rashid Adams, all protocol observed. My profound thanks to Ms. Caroline Peters and her team for hosting this event. I'm very pleased to join you today on this most auspicious day to launch this critical project on women coming into contact with the law in South Africa. This event coincides with the auspicious period of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which commenced on the 25th of November. In observing the United Nations Secretary General's campaign under its 2021 theme, Orange the World, End Violence Against Women Now, we need to acknowledge the universal nature of violence against women and girls, and acknowledge the particular challenges related to COVID-19 and conflict situations that you all have mentioned that exist in the Western Cape, as well as also celebrate the success stories, and many of you share it here. From your presentation, it's most evident. And to show that violence against women and girls can be prevented, and hence to inspire scaled up and greater investments in the proven solutions, very much like this. And so it's very opportune to hence consider the launch of this gender-responsive pilot project, the first of its kind and a major stride for South Africa to coincide with the observance of the 16 days of activism. And I don't think, having heard all the messages of support and seeing all of the partners gathered here today, I don't think it would have been more opportune to choose a better site than the Western Cape and vest that opportunity with Caroline and her partners. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations rules for the treatment of women prisoners and non-custodial measures for women offenders, known as the Bangkok Rules, is the only comprehensive, internationally agreed set of rules on gender-responsive measures in prison or instead of prison. It encourages governments to avoid the unnecessary imprisonment of women, complementing the gender-neutral provisions of the UN Standard Minimum Rules for Non-Custodial Measures, known as the Tokyo Rules. Over the past decade, great strides have been made to to raise awareness and implement the Bangkok rules in various parts of the world. While some countries have adopted the Bangkok rules as part of their national mandate, in recognition of the needs of women in prisons, others have made an effort to implement the rules despite resistance and/or multiple constraints. However, since 2000, the population of women in prison has continued to increase at a faster rate compared to the general prison population. The harmful and negative impact of imprisonment on women, their families, and communities cannot be overstated. Thus, there is an urgent need to spread awareness of the Bangkok rules even further and ensure that more countries can effectively implement these guidelines in their policies and in their practice. I don't have COVID. I've just been tested. It's been too many countries traveling and too many different climates. One has to consider the factors that necessitate the application of the Bangkok rules. That is, factors that impact women coming into contact with the law. And I think many of you have illustrated the cases that brought women into contact with the law in the Western Cape. Some of the factors behind female imprisonment include the punitive responses to women with substance abuse disorders, or women involved in minor drug offenses, as well as the targeting by criminal laws of behaviors related to sexuality, such as sex work. This increase reflects the specific vulnerability of women with regards to poverty, gender-based discrimination, and violence. It must be noted that imprisonment has a negative impact on women in terms of their safety, the impact on their dependence, a deterioration on their mental health, and resultant stigma when they're released into communities, but also due to the lack of gender-specific facilities and the lack of gender-specific rehabilitation programs for women. Hence, it is important for policymakers and criminal justice professionals to better understand the main drivers leading to women imprisonment and the harmful impact of women's imprisonment. Overall, non-custodial measures can reduce the social and economic cost of imprisonment and help to reduce the prison population and rates of recidivism. Non-custodial measures can help address women's particular needs and foster their reintegration process. The community is better served by community-based interventions which address the underlying causes of women coming into conflict with the law. It is important that non-custodial measures are gender responsive. Many non-custodial measures and sanctions overlook the typical characteristics, roles, and backgrounds of women in contact with the law, and that can be implemented in a way which causes further harm to women or imposes a different form of harm or control. Policy makers should hence increase the allocation of resources dedicated to community-based alternatives to imprisonment and to organizations working to address underlying causes of women coming into contact with the law, so that there's increased focus on prevention. So, with regards to the UN supporting this particular project, we are really, really happy to be able to support this project, but ultimately, it's government and policy makers that can make sure this particular kind of project is integrated into South Africa. The UN can only provide the international conventions, the international norms and standards for good practices. Hence, policymakers and justice sector professionals should incorporate the provisions contained in the Tokyo Rules, the Bangkok Rules, and Nelson Mandela Rules into domestic law and practice, ensuring that gender-responsive non-custodial measures can be easily and fully implemented. For minor charges where the woman in contact with the law does not pose a serious or dangerous threat to safety and society, alternatives to prosecution such as case dismissal, decriminalization, diversion and treatment programs, restorative justice, and other alternatives should be considered, while also making sure that we keep in mind upholding always the respect for the law and the rights of victims. Police, prosecutors, and judges have the responsibility to ensure that those who appear before them who cannot afford a lawyer are provided with access to legal aid. Pre-trial detention should be used as a means of last resort, and non-custodial measures should be considered at every stage of the criminal process. Gender particular mitigating factors should be considered during sentencing and mandatory sentences. It is important to provide judicial authorities with relevant information about women in conflict with the law. Example, their caring responsibilities, their history of victimization, or mental health needs, to enable informed sentencing options. Gender-based violence is a key pathway to women's imprisonment, undoubtedly. And this has been tested in terms of our situational assessment that has been documented and has provided the impetus and foundation for this project. Findings of the situational assessment conducted during this year within the South African context indicated that women's pathways into the South African criminal justice system generally follow a pattern of substance abuse, experiences of victimization, extreme physical, mental, and emotional abuse, poverty, mental illness, gangsterism, among other sociological factors. Again, my emphasis that the Tokyo Rules and the Bangkok Rules provide a blueprint to avoid the negative impact of imprisonment on women, their children, families, and the community at large. They prescribe an approach that intentionally takes into account gender nuances, women's particular needs, circumstances, and backgrounds. They prioritize applying non-custodial measures at every stage of the criminal justice process. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sustainable Development Goals, which every country is striving towards, in particular SDG 5, which achieves gender equality and empowerment of all girls, and SDG 16.3, equal access to justice for all, and the overarching objective of leave no one behind, will not be attained unless there is a transformative approach to the way that the criminal justice system responds to women and girls. Today's event is an emphatic stride that indicates that the criminal justice system in South Africa will no longer ignore women's particular needs and backgrounds. And you as partners have actually provided that support to collaborate and to coordinate that impetus to making sure there are particular needs that will be actually implemented within this project but will be sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I wish to emphasize UNODC's ongoing commitment to assisting with interventions, regulations, policies that enhance the non-custodial measures and ensure that they work for women in conflict with the law. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your messages of support for this project in the Western Cape, for finding the time to actually join us today. I would also like to thank the committee members who have actually contributed to this project, to the foundation of this project over this 2-year journey, and in particular Carol Peters for giving occasion to this event. I recognize and acknowledge the presence and contributions of the many experts in the room, including the criminal justice sector, social sectors, law enforcement and civil society who are here and committed to the transformation of these interventions that will always take cognizance of the rights of women in conflict with the law. I look forward to your strengthened coordination and collaboration, and also look forward to you supporting each other in the replication of this pilot project to other provinces in this country. And we all know that what starts in South Africa can be replicated to other countries in the SADC region. And I look forward to that, to going forward when I meet other countries to be able to share the successes of this project and how it can be initiated in the other countries. With that, I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reddy. I must personally, Dr. Naidu, and that comes before an apology. I numbered my notes yesterday before the schedule change, and so I could not. So I am going to just post keynote speech, introduce Dr. Linda Naidu, who is the National Project Officer for Gender-Based Violence with the UNODC Regional Office for Southern Africa. Prior to her current role, Dr. Linda Naidu held the following positions: Director of Childline in KwaZulu-Natal and Child Protection Advisor at the Mott MacDonald International Health. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to Advocate Michelle Adams, who is the Acting Regional Court President with the Judiciary. Advocate Adams is the current Acting Regional Court President with over 27 years of experience and started out as a prosecutor in 1994 and has worked in the various courts in the Western Cape, including Mitchells Plain, Bellville, and Cape Town courts. Oh, and she is joining us via Zoom. Advocate Adams, we can't hear you. There's no sound. She's not on mute though. Is it? It's not here. Is the sound up?
Mute yourself.
Okay, there, we've got sound now.
Thank you and good morning again. I hope I am audible now. I join the long line of speakers extending well wishes and messages of support and encouragement on the launch of this very important pilot project and the important issue that is at the center of it. It is one which will impact the lives of many, including those women who find themselves in conflict with the law, but also those who are important in their lives, often children and the elderly relatives they care for. How we deal with these situations impacts how we conduct ourselves in our everyday lives, but also more importantly, from a court perspective, how we conduct ourselves in our professional lives, where the decisions we make can have profound consequences for these women. May I, at this juncture, be afforded an opportunity to applaud those strong, tenacious, committed, dedicated, and selfless women and men in our communities who, like Caroline Peters, my colleague Yaki Wessels, Dr. Linda Naidu, and researchers like Dr. Karina Giancomello, and institutions, organizations like the UNODC, who has strong leadership like Dr. Naidu, who tell the story of countless victims of gender-based violence that have lost their voice or the ability to articulate their stories in court as prosecutors and even legal representatives who act on behalf of these women facing prosecution, but particularly as judicial officers. We are often at a disadvantage in that we see before us an alleged offender and we are provided with information relating to what they are alleged to have done, but very seldom are we alerted to why they did what they did. I recently read a quote which says, "Don't judge people for the choices they make when you don't know the options that to choose from." As I've indicated, often as judicial officers, we are not given pertinent information which may have been important to enable us to make balanced, appropriate, but above all, just decisions in the cases that come before us. This is why projects such as this one and tenacious and brave women such as those who are here today to fight what President Ramaphosa recently referred to as the second pandemic we are facing is so important. We come from different backgrounds and often we bring the emotional baggage we have gathered over the span of our lives with us in our decision making. Put differently, we make decisions informed by our own life experiences. And often when someone speaks, for example, of home, the very first image that pops into our heads is that of our own home. So what we do and how we react and make decisions is to an extent informed by our social context, and the social context impacts how we make decisions and ultimately on the types of decisions and orders we make in court. So we have often have preconceived ideas about concepts like gender-based violence, accused people, and the reason why they do certain things. Social context is the surroundings, the people, the occasion, etc., that influences how you interpret things, how you speak, what you speak about, or even how you act. How you react in a social context has something to do with experience you have had beforehand, and important, therefore, in this type of scenario that we are given as judicial officers who have to make decisions in these circumstances, information, and that is why stakeholder participation is so important. We as people often use criticism to show how we feel without saying words most of the time. We do so by what we do and the way that we do it. However, for the accused and witnesses or litigants, that may be the only contact that they have with people with the ability to make meaningful impact with the decisions that is made that will affect them. So it's important for us to be empowered to be able to do so. It is also this very same social context that teaches us to expect certain behavior from certain people. We become rigid in how we deal with situations because we are not given pertinent information to augment our own social context, and we often find ourselves judging the choices people make because we do not understand the reasons why they do what they do, nor do we have any idea about the options there to choose from. This type of scenario is often informed by a situation where, due to lack of knowledge or insight into the situation, we just react to how we perceive things from our perspective. Projects such as this one we are embarking on with this pilot has much to contribute to a change in the mindset of people, in that the fact that we have many different stakeholders with different abilities to gather information which can be placed before decision makers and policy makers to guarantee better outcomes for vulnerable members in our communities. As the saying goes, knowledge is power, and in this instance, once decision makers have the information, they can make decisions that will empower vulnerable groups and ultimately aid in the fight against the sick behavior seeking to engulf our communities in a tidal wave of senseless violence. This is where the work in this area by the UNODC and the various organizations here today is so very important in enabling us as court officials and judicial officers to make decisions that will enrich, enhance, and better the lives of our communities, of which women often form the backbone. The research undertaken and the measures and tools developed in line with the research that has been conducted goes a long way in creating alternative pathways that will ultimately benefit our communities more, as it addresses the root causes of why women who are victims of gender-based violence find themselves in conflict with the law, and they then develop measures that seek to address these root causes with the aim of empowering these victims to enable them to make more appropriate choices. We often hear the refrain that it takes a village to raise a child, and in this case, the child being this pilot and the village comprised of the many stakeholders who are here to dedicate themselves to the task at hand. I'm very and extremely excited, as so many of my colleagues, by this project, as the multi-stakeholder involvement means that we will be having meaningful interactions and stimulating dialogue aimed at ensuring that all attempts are made to lessen the harm caused by the scourge of gender-based violence, and that meaningful interventions in terms of diversions, which will allow for the benefit of exposure to programs aimed at uplifting and empowering women, and more importantly, avoiding the stigma attached to getting a criminal record, and in those instances where prosecutions do proceed and end in convictions, that a court is empowered and given the benefit of being placed in the full picture of what happened that caused the events leading up to that point, so that the sentence is aimed at more than just punishing the offender, but rather to allow for the person who stands to be sentenced to be given the benefit of a sentence that takes account of all relevant information, which programs such as this one will then make possible. In conclusion, I want to indicate that while we are fortunate to receive the benefit of projects such as this one, that will contribute greatly to enhance the way in which we manage the decisions and orders with regard to women in conflict with the law as a consequence of the negative impact on gender-based violence on their lives, And we are so immensely thankful to the selfless and thoughtful acts of kindness shown to women who have seen the very worst life has to offer and have had to overcome a great deal. The work done by the countless organizations who have pledged their commitment to this project will go a long way to enable courts to take the initiative to broaden our knowledge, and in so doing our ability to make meaningful impact in the lives of those affected by the decisions and orders we make. This is especially important in a country as diverse as it is beautiful, such as ours, but where we see gender-based violence has had more than its fair share of tragedy associated with the second pandemic raging in South Africa. And I want to end by quoting Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, who said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality." And with that, I wish to thank you, and I apologize for taking up a bit more time than was probably allowed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Advocate Adams. There have been some changes to the schedule. You'll see Dr. Zodwa Mosoma from the Department of Correctional Services should have come next. Unfortunately, they are not here with us. And then Advocate Wilna Lamley, the CEO of Legal Aid SA, was scheduled to speak. She is not able to join us, but who will be joining us is Nomawethu Mfebele with Legal Aid South Africa. The ATHLONE local office is with us, and she will come up to the podium now with her message of support.
Thank you very much, and greetings to all, and all protocol observed. I just want to first just make a quick correction. Advocate Velna Lemley is actually the provincial head of the Gauteng province, and she's unfortunately not able to join us today, and as well as Ms. Nolita Jali, who is the provincial head of the Western Cape province. They're both not able to join us today. But the pilot project is happening at ATHLONE Court, ATHLONE Court, which is my direct court as the head of the office at the Legal Aid South Africa at ATHLONE. So I'm responsible for the work that comes from ATHLONE. So it's equally befitting that I am here today. So as Legal Aid South Africa, we support the initiatives of the UNODC. We view ourselves as a critical partner in this pilot project as we defend most of the women that appear specifically at the ATHLONE Court, as most of them are indigent and they will most probably not afford to pay for their own private lawyers. So we have been having meetings with Caroline, and as well as Deirdre, who's unfortunately not here today, I don't see her, some pre-launch meetings, so that when this project starts tomorrow, we know where to go and we know where to start. And I think our meetings have been fruitful, and we are standing here and sitting here today knowing the way forward tomorrow. All right. As I said, as Legal Aid, we support this initiative and interventions on non-custodial measures for the women in conflict with the law. And some of our strategies that speaks to this pilot project and other pilot projects are that we have a responsibility to inform and empower communities about their constitutional rights, and we must educate them through outreach programs so that when they stand in court or when they are in conflict with the law, they know that there is Legal Aid South Africa, lawyers that can defend them without them having to pay, and that perhaps they know where to go when they are faced with issues where they are in conflict with the law. And we also are mandated to deliver client-focused legal services for the indigent and vulnerable groups, which in this instance will be the women in conflict with the law. And this initiative is actually an affirmation and in line with the theme that is going through these 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children, that we need to move from awareness to accountability. So we are grateful that we are part of this program, and that come tomorrow, we all hands on deck. We are working and ensuring that every woman that enters that court building tomorrow, we are there and we are ready to defend them, and working with Caroline, identify those matters that would help this project, that will enhance the handbook, as you have said to us when you opened this conference. And I can safely stand here and say, as Legal Aid, we are happy to be part of this project, and we are ready. Particularly happy that there are stakeholders here that could assist us post-trial when we are faced with situations where we must argue before the magistrates that for non-custodial sentences. Because the problem is we want these women to be able to be trained and empowered on what to do so that they don't become repeat offenders. Because as we have already collected some data between me and Caroline, we have realized that there are many of these women who become repeat offenders for one reason or the other, which in this project, it will help us to go deep to their backgrounds, to the causes. Why are they coming to court again and again, and specifically in the court of ATHLONE? And I'm happy that we are involved in this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we will welcome Advocate Bonnie Kari-Gamwo, Special Director of Public Prosecutions from the National Prosecuting Authority, with their message of support. Advocate Kari is the Special Director of Public Prosecutions in charge of Sexual Offences and Community Affairs Unit at the National Prosecuting Authority. She manages the GBV mandate of the NPA. Her appointment was preceded by 24 years as a prosecutor and advocate of the High Court. This appointment put her in charge of 55 Thuthuzela centers across the country.
Thank you very much, Lenina, for getting my name right. You're one of very few. So, good morning. I want to say all protocols observed, but I want to say good morning to all of the soldiers gathered here today to address GBV, because that is what we are, isn't it? We are soldiers gathered, all of us. It doesn't matter what rank you hold, because each and every one of us have the same goal and the same target. So I am particularly pleased to be here on behalf of the NPA. So allow me to first express my absolute deep gratitude to the UNODC, and in particular to Caroline Peters. When I was approached about this pilot project, I thought, what on earth do they want with the NPA? We put people in prison. You want to keep people out of prison. But as signatories to the CEDAW Convention, which is the Convention for the Eradication of the Discrimination of Women, South Africa has particular obligations, and I believe that through this initiative, Caroline, we will be able to really discharge our obligations towards women, particular women, marginalized women in this country. So So whilst it may appear odd that we, as the NPA, are trying to keep people out of the prison system, for me, it's about justice and fairness and what our perception of justice and fairness actually is. Now, for me as a prosecutor, because I'm a prosecutor, I said this to Linda earlier, you know, for 23, 24 years, I worked in the High Court of South Africa, and my main work was to put guys that commit femicide and child murderers. That was I almost want to say my forte. That is what I did. And so it's a different ball game now. But through it all, justice and fairness must permeate the criminal justice system, whether you enter it as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, whether you enter it as the presiding officer, whether you enter it as a witness, but also when you enter it as a perpetrator. In our context, a woman in conflict with the law, there must be justice and there must be fairness. Now, how do we measure and how do we interpret what is justice and what is fairness in the context? And the project, for this project to succeed, Caroline, that justice and that fairness must permeate throughout. When we implement this project, that justice and fairness, whoever looks at it through whichever glasses you're looking at it, either as the victim of what this woman might have done, must still see justice and must still see fairness. This project should not just be about keeping women out of prison. We all know, I did child murders for many years in the Western Cape. Many of our perpetrators were female, many of them. So we need to, again, look at the appropriateness of the decisions we are going to make in respect of our women. So for some, though, it may be easy to almost overlook the damage and the destruction caused by an offense being committed. And it's irrelevant, really, whether it's a woman or whether it's a man that is committing it. Destruction and damage is caused when you commit an offense. So we, as persons who are sworn to uphold justice and the law in this country, we must always remain resolute, always, in our quest to ensure that justice prevails. So how do we achieve this justice? Through this project, I do believe, if, as I said, we have that as our tenets, justice and fairness, this project will be successful. We will do so by changing the mindset of our communities, and yes, of our prosecutors as well, of our magistrates as well, that you don't just achieve justice through an arrest, that you don't just achieve justice through prosecution, but also through sentencing, for example, and also through alternate dispute resolutions. We've been practicing that for a very long time. Now, this is our opportunity as the prosecution to sort of amp it up a bit. Let's really look at our women in conflict and how we can apply alternative dispute resolution in respect of that. When one thinks sentencing, for many, sentencing for us is the higher we go, the better. Because the communities out there, when someone has committed an offense, they want that. They want this person to go to prison. So how do we change the community's mindset around justice in sentencing is not always going to be achieved by sending a woman in conflict with the law to prison. So that perception, Caroline, and to all of you sitting here, if you don't change that perception, people are going to toy when the prosecution decides this woman is not going to go through the justice system. We're going to either mediate or we're going to have a diversion. So we need to balance all the various factors at play. In law, we have what we call the Zin triad, where we look at how, when sentencing someone, we look at the victim and the rights of the victim and the interests of the victim, the interests of society as a whole, but also the interest of the perpetrator. And when we present that to court, they make a decision then on how best and what is the most appropriate sentencing to achieve that. So I cannot stress enough, we can only implement this in appropriate cases. This should not be a free-for-all. We must accept that there are violent women in our society, violent women that are causing havoc with our children, who are also vulnerable. And so that balance is going to be ultimately extremely important. So, Caroline, we support you wholeheartedly. You know this. I've engaged with you. And so this is an important project for me as well. You said earlier, Caroline, and I know you didn't mean it in that particular way, that, you know, sometimes the prosecutors don't understand the lives that these women go through. So I want to tell you that I am from the Cape Flats, proudly so. So we do understand and we do know. We have a different generation of prosecutors right now. We have our prosecutors that are coming from these types of backgrounds that are very savvy and are able to really relate, that when this woman stands in front of them, to understand the background that they come from and the bad decisions that are made. And so I think for us as the NPA, the focus has to be the woman that is in an abusive relationship who takes bad decisions as a result. I think if we hone in on that, that for me is what this project should be about. And like I said, I've been, how shall one put it, quite vigorous in saying this. We cannot support any other type of intervention because it cannot be a free-for-all. Justice must prevail. So I wish you absolutely everything of the best. The outcome should be that a female who experiences our criminal justice system must feel that the system treated her fairly. And if that is the outcome, then you've been successful. And if that is the outcome, and I will watch this from where I am in Pretoria with great interest, because I do manage the GBV mandate of the NPA. So if this is successful, then I'm going to say let's roll it out. Let's roll it out to other courts in the Western Cape, but also in the other provinces. GBV is not just here, it's everywhere. So I do, and we all have an interest in this, is it not? To ensure that we focus on a very marginalized section, because women are very marginalized in our communities. And yes, there are men that are also subject to GBV, definitely. You know, I have prosecuted women who have killed their men as well. So, but we also know that the majority are our women. And so we need to make sure as we forge ahead that we do this correctly. And I know, with the passion that you speak with, I know that it will come to fruition. And the support that you have in this room, and for those who could not be here and those that are online, I know that you will succeed. But from our side, we wish you everything of the best. Please do allow me, I think I am within time, Lenina, to just say this one poem, which really speaks to me and I think to women. And I think your outcome of your project for me would be this. And it's a poem by Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. And I want to say, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies, and you may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I will rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? That is a GBV victim right there. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I will rise. And leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise, into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Anne, for that poem, which I'm sure is a favorite of many of us. Next on our list, we had Lieutenant Colonel Tashwal Pulser, who is not with us. He would have spoken to us from the South African Police Services, but unfortunately could not join. Now we will move to Advocate Jackie Wessels, who was joining us from Zoom, who is the Regional Court President in Limpopo. Advocate Wessels started her career as a prosecutor in Pretoria and was appointed as District Court Magistrate for 2 years. She was part of the Cybercrime Bill task team and involved with training on cybercrime. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to also just voice my support for this. I've been part of this journey that started almost 2 years ago with the research that was done in this regard, and I have been very grateful of having been able to work together with Linda and Caroline and Vilma and Corina, as well as all the other people that gave us support. And I'm also very grateful that at the time when the pilot issue came up, I was able to discuss it with the acting regional court president, Michelle Adams, and that she immediately had been extremely enthusiastic to be part of this and for what we are trying to do here. Part of the issue are some of the things that previous speakers had already commented on and addressed. We do, for example, have got in our law alternative sentencing options available. Correctional supervision, where various different programs can be attended, and community service. Unfortunately, the reality is that very often, in particular with your lesser offenses, and it seems to be the easy way out would be to simply give a fine or a suspended sentence and not consider what the real purpose of sentence should be. You know, when we are sentencing people, we're all very quick to say rehabilitation is part of this purpose of sentence, and I'm taking that into account. However, how seriously do we do that? Some of the previous speakers mentioned the issue that as a presiding officer, I need the report from either the correctional official or a probation officer, a social worker, that tell me more about the pathway of the women standing in front of me that is in conflict with the law. And that report also makes the recommendations as to what would be appropriate. And part of the problem we often also have is that if a person is not being able to be monitored in accordance with the traditional understanding of monitoring, correctional supervision, for example, would not be considered. And we need to rethink the way that we are dealing with sentencing. Another big issue we're having, and that we hope that with this pilot project, it will be looked into as well, is that the programs we are telling people to go and attend in order for them to rehabilitate, whether or not those programs actually really make a difference. It seems that some of these programs are very gender neutral. In other words, it's not gender responsive enough, or does not really address the real needs of women, in particular in those specific situations that they are in. Unfortunately, also often women in conflict that really do need treatment options are not being given that, because that issue is never raised at court. And where treatment referral could be an option with sentence, it is never discussed, never referred. We don't know that that should have been an option to consider and might have been a more appropriate way of ensuring that the women's pathway can change. Because in the end of the day, the research has shown that women in conflict with the law, if you look at their pathways, more often than not, they had been victims of gender-based violence. And very often, when you are looking at somebody's criminal history or the history of conflict with the law, it often has got a small start or a low start with less serious offenses. And if we can make sure that at that stage, we deal with the case in such a way, be that through any possible diversion program, or if it has to be sentenced, through the sentence options we considered, and the way that we structure such options, that we can really make a difference, that there really will be rehabilitation, that they will be able to get out of the current path that they are on, that is leading them to the conflict with the law. One of the other issues that I've been raising quite a lot with regards to diversion is that though we do have a good diversion system for children in conflict with the law, currently with regards to adults, there's no real legislative provisions for any adult diversion. Though the MPA do divert adult offenders where they feel it's appropriate, because there's no proper formal legal framework for this, it is more difficult for them to have as part of the diversion the attendance of programs or counseling or any treatment. It's very difficult to do that if it's not part of a formalized framework. So part of what we have been doing as well is to raise awareness of the fact that we need some legislative changes in this regard, in particular, to provide for a proper framework of adult diversion. I am very grateful for having somebody like Caroline around with all her enthusiasm and the drive and her ability to mobilize everybody to be the ones that starts this pilot project, because this needs to be rolled out in the end of the day. And hopefully we will be able here in Limpopo to roll out also a pilot project, and hopefully from the lessons learned from this pilot project starting tomorrow, we will be in a better position and we'll be able to also make sure that our pilot would be a success, but it should not stay as pilots. It has to go beyond that and be essentially institutionalized at all our courts, because that is the only way that we can make a difference, is by making sure that we all do work together and that we are serious about ensuring that justice is done, but also that where there need to be assistance for an offender to truly change their ways, to rehabilitate, that the relevant programs and support in particular will be there. Some mention was made previously or by one of the other speakers on, for example, domestic violence. And again, we have been involved with that as well, and hopefully that will with the legislative changes on its way, it's again the situation of a mere piece of paper, a mere court order, a mere court sentence cannot bring about the healing and the counseling and assistance, etc., that is needed unless we all work together and make sure that the victims and also the offenders that needs assistance and treatment and need to change behavior all know where and how they can get the relevant assistance and support to really change. Because, like I said, a mere court order is not going to do that. It is only if there's something more to all of this. Caroline and the team and everybody that is going to be part of this ATHLONE pilot project, thank you so much for all stepping up and for being willing and so enthusiastic about doing this. And we all are looking forward to see the results, which we know will be a positive results. And I can't wait to start with the next one early next year up here in Limpopo. Thank you very much. And best wishes to everybody involved.
Thank you very much, Advocate Wessels. And now, last but not least, because you know, Minister, what they say, an event strategy is to keep the main attraction as the last speaker so that people don't leave. I would like to welcome the MEC for Social Development, Minister Shana Fernandez, who was appointed to her current role in 2019. She served as the Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament from 2014 to 2019, and prior to her political career, spent 30 years in 3 of South Africa's 4 largest banks. Minister Fernandez is the lead provincial minister for gender-based violence in the Western Cape. Well,
Program moderator, our host, Caroline Peters, the Executive Director of Colours Foundation, and also someone I can call a friend, Dr. Linda Naidu from the UNODC. Thank you for your keynote address. To all government departments represented in the room, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to just skip the protocol. Unlike me to say all protocol observed, but I do want to acknowledge the presence of all government departments because we are key to this project. I also want to welcome all of civil society. The support, the magic is in this room, Caroline, for you and your project to succeed. What we have heard here this morning, I think talks to women and men who are united, and I think it was, I'm trying to remember the name, the lady there who spoke about how we need to be intentional and how we all need to show up, because it's not about me, it's not about Shana, it's not about Caroline, it's not about Lenina. It has to be about the community and the women out there. And then I see some men in the room. Mr. Paul, so I see you over there. So let me say, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, goeiemorgen, assalamu alaikum, molweni shalom. I greet you in peace. And I stand here as a survivor of gender-based violence myself. I'm humbled, Caroline, and everyone else in this room to be part of this very vital intervention on non-custodial measures for women in conflict with the law. A first in this province and in the country, I believe, and I would like to imagine that this will be the start of a global best practice. Like Caroline and many other women in the room, I've had the privilege with and working with, and I see Bernadine Bacher was on, Tina Tiert I see in the room, Avril Andrews. There are just so many women in the room whom we work with on a daily basis.
I too have a passion, and I can speak for hours about a topic that is very close to my heart. But do bear with me, because I think today is a significant day, and it talks to Caroline's tenacity and perseverance. We know the story, and it's through our stories that we tell that we help and empower and heal others and ourselves. It's only when you tell your story that healing actually starts to happen. And we were just talking about Nantes Park the other day. And then, of course, we've got, there are many iconic places in this Athlone area. The Eon Group next door. We all identify with Athlone, a stadium, but we heard Caroline's version of Athlone Stadium. And then I think that makes me reflect on, do we understand where people come from? And do we know their stories and their reasons why? So for me, we work in an environment, and COVID is really, we had an environment that was in distress economically, socially, in all aspects. But what COVID-19 has done, it has exacerbated all of these challenges, and we are seeing poverty, the deepening of poverty. And I often watch Caroline's Kitchen and the people in the queue, and she'll send me pictures and say, Minister, see what's happening here. We see GBV. We saw with level 5 and 4 the lockdown. Tina Tiat came to the rescue. She set up a WhatsApp group for COVID survivors who were experiencing trauma. They couldn't get out their house. Very quickly, a quick partnership, whether it's formal or informal. But so there are people in this room I can talk about who have helped government, but remember, government does not have the silver bullet. So there's deepening poverty, there are high levels of unemployment, and the biggest red flag that has emerged post-COVID, or as we enter a fourth wave, is that of mental health and wellness. We are seeing an increase in substance use disorder. We are seeing an increase in the need for antidepressants, medication for pain. We are seeing all sorts of red flags that have told us that the next thing, or the next important piece of work we need to focus on, is that of one of mental health and wellness. We are going into a fourth wave. There has been announcements, but the province thankfully has been spared. But to spare thought for our medical sector, they have been under immense pressure. Our social workers who have had to go out and engage with people not knowing whether they're positive or not. And then we also see the high levels of crime and gangsterism, where as a government employee going to render services in areas, you become the victim yourself. So it's in a context of a society that is soaked in trauma. There's deep trauma, there's generational trauma, and we dare not forget the impact of the trauma of apartheid on the psyche of this nation. Like many people in this room, I grew up on the Cape Flats. Just yesterday, I attended a workshop where someone said a typical word on the Cape Flats is moffie. What does a moffie mean? But when you grew up on the Cape Flats, moffie was a word that everybody used, and it just made me reflect on where we come from. Many of us would say, "Julle moet uit die huis uit praat." That is probably the biggest inhibitor to victims of gender-based violence coming out and speaking, because the family wants to keep this shameful secret. And there's this old saying, I grew up with it, "Julle moenie uit die huis uit praat nie." It cannot be. We need to encourage our children to understand that if that uncle touches you inappropriately, or it could even be an auntie, you need to feel safe to speak about it. So it's in that context that I lead a department of only just over 2,500 staff. But a lot of the work that you deal with touches on what we do. We have youth in conflict with the law in child and youth care centres across the province. I often visit these child and youth care centres, and I try and understand what brings a 12-year-old in for murder in a child and youth care centre, or a 13-year-old for rape. And so I'm trying to do a whole lot of work and try to understand, because for me, 30 years of corporate is like a walk in the park compared to 2.5 years in this role. It is a steep learning curve, but it's also something or an area that I'm so heavily invested in. And when Caroline called me and said, Minister, we need your help as social development, I didn't hesitate to say we will be there. But having listened to the needs today, there's a lot more that we need to do as social development, especially in this ATHLONE area, to assist. So if I could remind everyone in attendance today and on the virtual platform that one of the most critical elements in the human condition is that individuals have the freedom of choice to create their being. One's choices ultimately determines who we are, and where we end up. But that being said, having the freedom to choose means that we do not always get our choices right. After all, we are merely human and we all make mistakes. And when we accept that we are human, we also realize that we are imperfect and that we make mistakes. And I think there's no one in this room who can say they've never made a mistake in their life. I have made many mistakes, and when I reflect on them and I think of the choices I made, which at the time might have been good for me, being in an abusive relationship, to stay in it, but I realized the negative impact it had on my son, because it imposed trauma, deep trauma on him that he is still, as a man, still having to deal with. Punitive measures for crimes, particularly minor crimes, can have serious unintended consequences for the actual victim. Because for years, government worldwide have dropped the idea of rehabilitation and restorative justice and expanded the use of incarceration. And I mean, we just need to look around at many countries. We are seeing more and more women being imprisoned, and they really shouldn't be there. If we listened to the previous speaker and Advocate Bonnie, we have to understand when women need to be incarcerated and when not. We know that when one is handed a criminal record, the chances of living a life of value and making a positive contribution to the community that you live in diminishes significantly. You know what people say in the community? There is that stigma, and that stigma prevents you from making progress, and every possible door gets closed in your face because you have a criminal record. We don't understand the impact of the imprisonment of that mother on the children that get left behind, and the trajectory that children go through and where they end up. And this is what I'm busy trying to piece together. How our foster children progress through a system, our children whose mothers have been imprisoned end up in foster care or in child care and youth care centers. So this is a much bigger piece of work, but this is a critical piece of work. I want to share a powerful sentiment which Erin Kelly, a professor of moral philosophy in the School of Arts, shared. And just to say, her research focused on the philosophies of punishment and the notion of a moral desert. That is, deserving consequences for your actions. And in her book, The Limits of Blame, titled Rethinking Punishment and Responsibility, she writes, and I quote, "I'm trying to get people to think more critically about who we are locking away, why we are locking them up, and whether we have a good reason to do that. I believe that the problems of criminal justice and the causes of crime are connected with broader issues of social justice that have to be addressed if these problems are going to be resolved. The criminal justice system cannot resolve the problem of crime on its own." And it's a sentiment I strongly agree with. Instead of focusing on punitive measures against our youth and women in particular, we all need to join hands to address the underlying social injustices that prevail. And what COVID-19 has presented us, ladies and gentlemen, is an opportunity to reset our moral compass so that we can actually focus on remedying, on reconciliation and redress. and focusing on healing the trauma, because no one wakes up on any given day wanting to be a murderer or a drug addict. There is deep-seated trauma that forces a person into that position. And I met Caroline, was it in 2014 in Maritzburg, way on the furthest part of this province. And you know, I always say there's no such thing as coincidence. It's divine intervention. I popped in to have a quick cup of tea, and there she was with Claudia Root. And let me tell you, the rest of the day was just talk, because we connected and it was incredible. And her work reaches from Cape Town to Maritzburg to Beaufort West to beyond. She's across the province, the country. And I want to say to all of you in the room, thank you for your support to her and for being such an incredible support by bringing your gifts. Because remember, in all our communities, people have gifts. Some are invisible and some are visible. But often in society, what we choose to do, and I think in government too, we tend to focus on what is wrong in a community and not what is strong in a community. And this intervention focuses on what is strong. We are going to build off a positive base rather than off a negative base. So Caroline and colleagues and team, I certainly hope this pilot may answer some of these questions and will help women who are in conflict with the law to ensure that they are granted the opportunity to turn their lives around. My hope is that this pilot will also help broaden public understanding surrounding non-custodial sentences. And there is certainly work to be done in that regard. As Advocate Yaki said, the interventions that we do, the training programs that we bring, are they appropriate? Are they directed to the right audience? Should we not be changing our focus? And I would like to believe that in the ministry we roll out programs, and also in the department, community partnerships. Tina, you would know Debbie is always out there. We need to now focus and fine-tune our training so we can plug into this piece of work so that it becomes relevant, because community engagement is key. For any project to survive, you need to invite the community from the get-go so you can co-create a shared future. Otherwise, if you leave the community behind, they will not buy into that project. And sadly, like many other projects, they become unsustainable and they fall through the cracks. So I remain aware that when the public is presented with real-life scenarios, their feelings that punishments are too lenient will tend to lessen. And this is indeed a worthwhile endeavor for those seeking to advance arguments about the futility of lesser sentences and the effectiveness of community alternatives. For this project to be successful, it requires a whole of government approach. So government departments need to work transversely, and it also requires a whole of society approach, because there is no silver bullet. No one department, individual or group can change this. And I wish to say to you, Caroline, that there is a project underway at the moment, and within the Department of Community Safety, we have started what is called area-based teams. And there are 11 area-based teams within the Western Cape. And I'm sorry that Colonel Paulse is not here today. But these area-based teams are the murder hotspots in the Western Cape. So we know that there are 11. And within that 11 murder hotspots, 8 of them are gender-based violence hotspots. And Colonel Paulse has been very instrumental in driving this message, together with Brigadier Hari and the rest of them. But I would want to ask, because Philippi is a hotspot, but I am going to have a conversation with Minister Albert Fritz and say we need to pull ATHLONE into this pilot. And because just had a meeting 2 weeks ago, ATHLONE Police Station expressed one of the captains said to me, Minister, we need to do something about gender-based violence. So, you know, whilst there are programs underway, we can't let other people or other communities fall through the cracks. I also have in the room, I think it's a young lady, is she here? Chantal Pepper, there she is at the back. Chantal is a long COVID survivor, so she's managed to get here today, and thank you, Chantal. Chantal and I were invited in 2019 by the UNODC to go and present on drugs, substance use disorder. She has got a rich history of substance use disorder, women, and the impact in terms of crime. So I would like to say publicly here, I wish to allocate Chantal as a resource to you. And also, I want to pledge on behalf of the Department of Social Development and the Western Cape government our support. Practically, we need to improve the quality of our reports when they get to the courts. I think that's the first thing we need to do. That's what I hear the legal people telling me, the justice system says. How do I get my team together? I am today, in fact, I've already asked my PA to schedule a date and a time so that we can meet with you and your team from a social development perspective, how we can bolster the support from the ministry, from the department, and I will be engaging cabinet regarding this very vital intervention. I am the lead minister for gender-based violence in the province, and I really think that it deserves the necessary attention that it should get. So, and Caroline, I don't say this because I know you or because we are friends. I have seen your persistence. I have seen, and I also know that you are going through your own personal trauma right now. We are seeing the impact, whilst it's 16 days of it used to be no violence against women, we are now seeing men trying to gag women. And it's sad. I have had to seek a protection order. And when women have to seek protection orders to protect themselves from men who prey on them, then I say we all need to stand together. Because today I am not the minister. My ID says Shana Fernandez. I am a survivor of gender-based violence, and I share your passion, but I also understand the challenges that you endure. And I just want to say to you and your entire team and every stakeholder who has made the time to show up today, let's support this cause. Let it become a best practice and eventually a global best practice that people can use to benchmark the activities. So from me to you, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, and everyone. We are almost at the end of our event now. I just want to, refer back to what the Minister said about mental health and wellness, especially during COVID. It's very interesting, I think, but not a surprise to see the increase in substance use disorder and depression. Because it really made me, I don't know about you, but the conversations that I had with everybody is that with the absence not just of substances but of busyness, a lot of us were forced to face our demons at home within ourselves. And so when we think about, I think you said, a society steeped in trauma, what that might look like at different levels. So I want to thank everyone, all the speakers, everyone that is here, that has joined us. We are going into closing remarks now. Caroline is coming forward again along with Selna Jansen. who is an admitted attorney of the High Court with a keen interest in public policy, trade law, and constitutional law, and the executive director of Zalner Jansen Consultancy, and is working on this project in partnership with Caroline.
You can go first. Oh gosh, I've got my laptop here. Good morning, everybody, and all protocol observed. So I want to thank everyone for their messages of goodwill and support, because we'll definitely be needing that support as we go forward in implementing and monitoring and evaluating the project. So I was asked to just quickly give brief feedback on what we've done. And as we've heard from Caroline and Linda and all the other people, like Yaki and Legal Aid, is that this project isn't starting the launch, it's just the launch, but it started 2 years ago. And before we even got here, we had a workshop in November on the draft handbook. And from there, we had a multi-stakeholder meeting where we just presented the project to everybody that was there and see how they would come on board. And following that, as Nomawetu has mentioned, we had meetings with the NPA and Legal Aid just to sort of like tell them what is going to happen, and those were successful. We also had meetings with the magistrates, and as you've heard from the magistrates, that the issue is, and even the MEC has mentioned, is the reports that they get. So they want to know, in terms of their sentencing, how they can give better sentences that will have a meaningful impact. And the other thing that they also mentioned was that they needed to know who the stakeholders are that provides the service, so then if there's monitoring involved, they would have that. So they are very keen, and we had some really good meetings with them. So after this, we have met with the key stakeholders. What we are going to do now is that NPA and Legal Aid, they have met, they've identified certain cases. So the next step for us is to obviously meet with the accused and then have follow-up meetings with stakeholders to see what services they can provide. So we have our work cut out. We'll undertake a mapping exercise to consolidate the roles and responsibilities of all the relevant stakeholders. And yeah, so we'll need to have those one-on-one meetings. And then once all of that has been done, we do have a draft monitoring tool. And obviously it's a draft, so when we start engaging with the accused, with the NPA, when Belisa does the assessment, then that tool is obviously going to change. But from that tool, we will develop findings and gains. There will be challenges, of course, and we will obviously, with the help of the NPA and Legal Aid, see how we can overcome those challenges and make recommendations that are legal. So we do hope to provide some key findings. Our milestone is the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. So we'll give you some feedback on the successes, the challenges, and then we finish off in June. We'll obviously have a qualitative research. We will get all these findings, have codings, like what are the insights, and put together a report that hopefully can be, not hopefully, that will be. So from my side, thank you, Caroline. I hand over to you.
Thank you, Zalna. So as you see, there's not just me, the activist loudmouth. We have academics on board as well, because, yeah, so Zalna is the academic support, and then Siam Samai with Women's Legal Center also is part of this proposal, as well as an advocate, Tia Ilsley. So Tia Ilsley is an academic that support female offenders through their studies at UNISA. So she will be writing up this project. So there's going to be a lot of writing up, because it needs to be evidence-based. So by time comes in June, we also want to, I mean, if UNODC has done funding, we know this is a project that must continue. So UNODC is on board until June, but then how do we then take this forward in the province? So we need the evidence, And so this will largely, the writing up will be edited and documented by Tia Ilsley, who's an academic, with my colleague Zalna Jansen, and I've got Lenina. Lenina, read this, do that. So I'm the speaker, they're the writers, okay? And I'm the doer. I make sure that things happen here. So yeah, and they're the writers. Ek kan nie skryf nie. That's not for me. I don't write anyway. So I just want to, so like Zalna said, so that's the way forward for us. We're very excited, and everybody, like we said earlier, please, this is just the launch. This is the beginning. We're going to need each and everyone in this room's participation. We're going to come knocking on doors. We're going to, Martha Muller, I look at you and I think, my sister, you don't know, I'm going to send you documents to read, because Martha writes beautifully. She writes if I look at your writings, over the years with Sawid, I want to acknowledge you in the room, sister. She's just said goodbye to her husband. We were traveling together to Pretoria 2 weeks ago when we got the news that George is gone, and we got to travel back together. And thank you. I know this is your first time out after your loss, your big loss. So I want to honor you for coming to honor us here today. Thank you, Martha. And then Tina, Ian van my, Tina is my one of those mamas that we get cross for mothers too, no? And and then I'm cross with her and that. But each and every person, Liesel, I don't want to mention names because then I'm going to miss someone and someone's going to say something. But everybody here in this room plays a huge part, Me and Minister, I was in Hermanus for the weekend on holiday, and Minister and I speak 11 o'clock at night on the phone. Who speaks to the Minister on a Saturday night at 11 o'clock about gender-based violence? But that's the passion we have for what we do. So to the Cape Flats Women's Movement, my sisters who are here, that keep me real, that keep it real for me, all of you, to my daughter Zoe that I could phone and say, come, take a day off tomorrow. She's a nurse, by the way, so she's in the nursing profession, that come, you must put your day off tomorrow so that you can help with registration and a run for the flowers and biscuits for everybody. And then to the team, to the colors team, Pelisa and I sat on Sunday. Pelly, thank you. You came on board the right time, our social worker. We employed a new social worker to help with the matters, And then the staff of the colors team, all those in the orange t-shirts, as you can see, that's our motto, silence hides violence. We do not hide, we don't want to hide violence. My friend and sister Lenina, thank you. You did a beautiful job here today. Thank you. Just give Lenina a round of applause. She was so nervous. She said, Caroline, look who you've got on the program and me. You were quiet, sister. Yes, the Women's Show. She's the producer and of the Women's Show and presenter of the Women's Show. Yeah. And Tutuzele and Hazel, of course, always the same media we find that will come out and support us. Hazel, thank you, my sister. My Uncle Gerald Paulser, thank you for supporting me in all the work that I do. And then to the stakeholders, of course, Tasneem. Where's Tasneem? Gone. She's gone. Oh, she's still around. Thank you to the NPA, because, those are the people that I'm going to need. I already, they know me now at ATHLONE Magistrate Court since last week. No more way I've been in and out in the court, so they know they can't miss my hair. I will not change my hair. The lady with the blonde hair, even in the protection order, I want to tell you, I have an interim protection order granted against me by an alleged rapist for harassment. So in the order, Minister, we had asked, can you identify the person? He says it's an elderly colored lady with blonde hair. So I'm the elderly colored lady with the blonde curly hair that harass alleged rapists. So that's me, and I'm okay with that title. So I'm going back to court at Kailicha Court on the 13th of December to defend that order. So I want to say, watinta bafazi, watintum bokodo. You don't know what's coming. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to stop there with the activist stuff. But thank you, everybody. Thank you. God bless you. And I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you. My sister Amanda, thank you for printing those things. There's printouts outside on the situational assessment. There's a printout on the handbook, the draft handbook. So for those of you that want to collect a copy, please familiarize yourself with it. I know it's long. Read it in bed at night, but familiarize yourself. A lot of work has gone on into those documents. Minister, thank you for coming. And to everyone, God bless you. And I'll see you soon. To the advocate, Abdul Rauf, my colleague in the in the sector, you know, we need more males that takes up this mantle of GBV. And I know there were 2 other males that had to leave earlier. So I want to thank you. I know it's not easy to come into the strong women's spaces. So thank you. But thank you. God bless you all. Oh, and thank you for those that came online. Thank you.